Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our special show, the Unspoken Tears live talk show. My name is Dave Rogers, and I am the facilitator and advisor to Voice of Men 360. Let me share a brief intro into Voice of Men 360 International Men's Day and why this talk show, the Unspoken Tears, is important and what it is about. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 organization was born out of this, seeing a tremendous need and stepping out to help and provide service and support to help men through their many challenges they're facing. We are part of the International Men's Day. International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years, and so far 90 countries around the world have joined together to provide various services and activities to support men. IMD follows 6 pillars, which is the well-being of boys and men. We follow in the same footsteps. The unspoken tears. Men do have feelings, emotions, and stories. However, they do not show up very often. Many of us think that only women are going through sexual abuse, domestic violence, human trafficking. Many men have also to face these challenges in their lifetime, but they have never been told how to deal with it. There are many unimaginable stories behind every man. That is why we want to create a space to discuss openly and find ways to bring healing to the most vulnerable in our society. This show runs on the second Saturday of every month, usually from 10 to 11 a.m. Today, we've had a slight shift to 10:30 a.m. We bring experts to share real-life stories, to talk about it, and this is a one-to-one conversation. Panel discussions and information systems are also part of the process. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to meet a gentleman who has a phenomenal background in finance, in dealing with people from all walks of life, and his personal journey of self-development and growth. The disclaimer for Voice of Men 360. Please be advised that contents brought forward for any event facilitated by Voice of Men 360s is always brought forward in good faith. However, being brought forward, the types of dialogue and conversations, it might create a trigger or reaction to the listener. The facts and informations are believed to be accurate and timely that they're offered from Voice of Men 360s. All facilitators, guest speakers, panel members, and audience participants are responsible for using their own good judgment in taking any actions that may relate to the discussions. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where there may be emotions at risk. It is important to know that this organization is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection, and is not providing therapeutic service. If you need crisis intervention or therapy, you need to engage the services of a mental health professional. If you have any questions about this disclaimer on the panel discussion, you're free to contact the Voice of Men 360 organization through the website. Contact information is posted. With that said, going forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in the event in any capacity, we welcome you. Should you decide that this event is not for you at any time, we respect your choice, and we welcome you to join us again at another time. Welcome to our special guest today, Mr. Robert Galletta. Tell us a little bit about your background, Robert, and thank you very much for joining us on Voice of Men 360.
Being asked, I feel honored. Anybody asks me to speak anywhere. And first of all, please feel free to call me Bob, because it's a more familiar term. And I'd like to think that we are going to be discussing some very sensitive issues, and that we should at least be on familiar terms. So please, Dave, feel free to call me Bob. My name is Bob Galletta. I currently reside not too far outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States. I was originally born in New York City, and I grew up in a somewhat very dysfunctional environment. I was raised in an organized crime family and taught a much different set of principles as to how to engage the rules of life and how to interact and connect with other human beings. And have experienced a lot of trauma in my life. For reasons that are not still clear to me, my family had to leave New York when I was young. We went down south. I think my father had gotten into some kind of trouble with some people, and we kind of started a life down south in the U.S., and my father brought his ways with him, and we were engaged, or he was engaged in a lot of illegal activities and trying to run his own little enterprise there. And the shortest version of the story is we were down south for about 4 years, and our time there pretty much ended when my father murdered my mother. And he didn't face any charges. Nothing happened. It was a couple of days shy of Christmas, which is the day before my birthday. So just prior to my 10th birthday, my father murdered my mother, and it really affected who I was, or in the terms that I use today, who I be. And I know that's a grammatically incorrect statement, but it really is the essence of who I have become, because I'm very focused today on who I choose to be rather than some of the things that I do. So for me, in my own transformational journey, who you be is a whole lot more important than what you do. And we can get into that a little bit later. But my father murdered my mother when I was a kid and dealt with a lot of anxiety and trauma. I learned very early on that there were many things that I could do externally that would change how I felt internally, because internally I was a mess. I had to figure out some way to deal with all of those feelings and that anxiety and the stress. And of course, it wasn't proven that this, at least not at the time, that was my father was responsible for any of this. And it was just a confused, scared, hurt little boy. And I didn't know really how to process those emotions. And I found out very young that I could do some things. I could use violence or alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, basically anything that I could do externally to change how I felt internally. And that is why today I'm more focused on who I be, because no matter what it was that I did, at the end of the night, in what I call the quiet place, which is alone, head on pillow, with nothing but my thoughts, I truly hated who I was. And so none of those things that I did externally could change how I felt, at least not for a long enough period of time. And so today, alone, in the dark, in the quiet place, I'm no longer hearing the voice that says that I'm not a good son, I'm not a good husband, I'm not a good father, I don't measure up, some version of I'm not enough. Today, in the quiet place, when I lay my head down, the voice in my head that I hear says, I am fully aware of what I offer to the world, and I truly love who I have become. So that's just a little bit about me. There's a whole bunch of other traumas. I was engaged in a 25-year relationship where I suffered tremendously from emotional abuse. And that's something that I think a lot of guys don't talk about, because for me to say I'm being abused by a woman who's not, I'm 6 feet tall, I weigh 190 pounds, and I'm married to a woman who's, 5'7" and weighs $120. How's she abusing you? But there's a whole lot more that goes to it. And there was there was all that guilt and shame about, I can't talk about this. I can't share this with anybody. I can't let anybody know what's really going on, because pride and ego get in the way. Right? I can't tell my friends. They're going to make fun of me. People are going to think less of me. And so those are just a couple of the things that I had to deal with in terms of trauma and abuse. I've been stabbed a bunch of times and shot a couple of times. I've worked at the worst possible place ever on Wall Street. I started my journey as a stockbroker at a place called Stratton Oakmont, which most people didn't used to know about. Now everybody knows about because of the Wolf of Wall Street and Jordan Belfort in the movie. And my life was just one long, very long, continuous, dysfunctional, traumatic, insane ride until about 7 years ago, when I made a decision that I wanted to be different. And that's where I am today. I'm living a life that I choose to live by being who I choose to be, And I've built a coaching program out of that. I have a podcast where I help other people to unlock their true potential so that they can be living the life that they choose. And that's just a little bit of me. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Dave, or take the conversation anywhere you'd like to go.
Well, that's a fantastic overview of a very colorful life, Bob, and I really appreciate your authenticity and genuineness to share. I love your concept of who I be. Grammatically correct or incorrect, it's spot on. And I guess the question might be is that concept today where before and after the trauma and your concept of who I be. Could you share a little bit about the steps that you went through 7 years ago to start going from that shame, guilt, hate inner voice to today a voice that is, it sounds like the voice is giving you a pat on the back and saying, good day, good job, you're doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I was sharing my story about 2.5 years ago. I was being interviewed, and one of the gentlemen conducting the interview, he was asking about my background. And he said, well, it seemed, he said basically the same thing you just did. And what he said was, well, what system did you use? And I said, excuse me? He said, well, yeah, what was the system that you put in place to get from where you were, because it sounds like it was really difficult, to where you are, because it sounds like you're doing well. And I said, there was no system. And he said, well, how'd you do that? You had to have some steps in place. And I said, well, I just shared with him what I did. Was I didn't subscribe to anybody else's idea of how to go through this transformational process. I just described to him what I actually did was, and you know, it's funny, Dave. I just gave you a glimpse of many, many, many things that I had that were traumatic. You know, I ingested drugs and alcohol for most of my life. I smoked crack on and off for 35 years with varying degrees of success. And I say that because I was what's called a functioning addict, which means I didn't lose my job. I didn't check out. I was still, you know, at work, still taking care of the kids. I made sure we had milk in the fridge. And once the kids went to bed at night, then I just turned into an animal. But it was important to me to make sure that I would go to sleep most of the time, even for a couple of minutes, so that I could not look like a deranged lunatic when it was time for me to wake my kids up and cook them a breakfast and send them off to school. But so the reason why I say that is because all these things, right, all this juggling of pain, all this juggling of trying to find moments of release from the pain and the anxiety, and most of the mess in my life I created myself. Like what happened with my father and my mother had nothing to do with me. And I got to tell you a story about that because it's super important. I'll get back to it in a second. But to answer your question, so I'm in this interview, and I told the story, which was even all those incidents, you would think one of them would have been a catalyst to bring about some type of change. And funny, none of them were. 7 years ago, I was sitting in my driveway. I'm sitting in the car. Nothing extraordinary, nothing out of the norm had happened that day. And I just said, you know what? I'm just tired. I just made a decision that I wanted to be somebody else. I just couldn't stand who I was. And I had no idea how I was going to do that, right? Because everything that I know, all the stuff that's in this realm of what's known in Bob's head got me right to that spot. And I had always tried different things, and it always went right back in the same spot. So on this particular day, I just said, you know what, enough's enough. I'm fed up. I made a decision that I was going to be different, but I didn't know how. I had no resources. I thought there were no resources available to me to make any kind of improvements in my life. So I made a decision to be open-minded to the idea that there was some possibility of improvement. So I became on that day, number one, I made a decision. And number two, I became open to the idea of what's possible. And then I sat back and I created in my mind a vision of what I now call Best Bob, what would best Bob look like? What would that life look like? So who would be the people that would be surrounding me in this fairy tale world that I've created in my mind? How would they interact with me? What would I be doing? How would I be acting? How would I be feeling in this new body, in this new life, in this new realm? What would other people around me, what would they be thinking, and what would they be feeling? And how would we be interacting, and what would I be getting from that? What would they be getting from me? So I created this vision in my mind, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. So then I asked myself, well, what would best Bob do? Because I know what I do, and what I've done got me screwed up and got me into a mess and trouble. You know, I've been locked up. I don't honestly know how many times, in and out of jail for assault most of my life. That started at 9 and it ended about 7 years ago, you know? And so I asked myself, well, what would best Bob do in this scenario? And then I just acted congruent with that vision. And some things worked and some things didn't. And when I said that, the videographer, the interviewer says, oh, diary. And I said, excuse me? He goes, yeah, decide, imagine, act, and then, you know, review, and then adjust accordingly. I said, okay, I'll buy that. He says, you just have to come up with something for the why. And I said, you choose. And he goes, there you go. And in that moment, on that interview, I gave a name to the transformational process that I had implemented in my life, which I now call the diary system. And it stands for decide, imagine, act, review, and you choose. Because sometimes it's not just I make a decision and then I have to check in with that decision every week, every month, every year, especially in the beginning. Sometimes it's every 5 minutes. If I'm going to choose to be a different person, I have to consciously be aware that I made that decision, and I want to make sure that I stay congruent with that decision, congruent with that vision in my mind, and act accordingly. And sometimes that's every couple of minutes, but I have to remember that I have the choice, because it's not like I forgot who I used to be, and I didn't forget how to live that way. And as a matter of fact, because I lived that way for so long, it becomes so comfortable that you have to actually reprogram your brain to be different. We have to create new neural pathways in the brain for this new learned behavior, because it's very easy, you know, regardless of the pain, to go back to the same old thing. And that's one of the reasons why it kept me in a marriage that well past the expiration date, and both for her and I, because neither one of us could do something different to go through the discomfort and the dis-ease of creating new. And so that's one of the things that I teach my students today when I teach them the diary system, is all about how to create new.
Well, congratulations on the diary system, coming up with it and sharing it. It's absolutely brilliant. It has such an application to people right now, because for so many people, if they simply start keeping a diary, they're gonna change their life, because they're gonna be reflective. You are a type of person who's incredible visionary, and for you to have that vision of the type of life that you have with Best Bob, it's something that brought you forward and allows you to be where you are, and also to get excited about your future. I gotta
say though, Dave, let me just say this though, real quick. There is nothing extraordinary about me, because what I have done, every single one of us can do. We all have the power to do it. And I have to give credit where it's due. Like I said, I didn't invent the acronym of diary. Someone else did. I lived through it. I performed those acts, but not with the intention of, well, let me create a system and then do it. You know, the name for it was given to me by somebody else. As a matter of fact, my podcast, Beyond Our Boundaries, it's an acronym for Bob. I didn't come up with that name either. One of my friends did, because I was trying to talk about how we can push ourselves to beyond what's known, and yet still kind of try to find some way to accentuate Best Bob, because Best Bob is the one that created this whole new world. And all credit goes to my friend, because he created it. So I'm very happy, Mr. Jeffrey Berry. He created the Beyond Our Boundaries name for my podcast. And I just want everybody to know that what's possible, being open to the idea of what's possible, enabled those things to happen. I didn't have to create them. I just acted in accordance with who I wanted to be. And then I let the universe pour into me. And other people showed up, and they showed up in a big way, as they still continue to do. And anybody can do that.
Thank you, Bob. And again, for our listeners right now, and also for Bob to hear, what he's also demonstrating a key factor of people who do reach a certain level of success is they become incredibly humble, and they be very kind and generous to other people. And that's one of the things you're doing right now by honoring the people around you that are making your life so much more harmonious and peaceful. And the type of way that you want to treat yourself, you're treating others, and that becomes a beautiful cycle. And that is Best Bob. I really love that acronym, and it's great that, again, working with others also allows you to bounce things back and forth. And because you did choose to be open, and you're also inviting people to make the choice, that's, again, another really wonderful way to hold the space for people to do what they choose. So I wanted to ask you a question about the biggest challenge that you're finding that men are experiencing these days.
Well, that's great, because I was just about to add on to what you were just talking about, but that question, it's right in line with it. You're talking about humility. You're talking about being humble. You guys have to understand. So I was raised in an environment where the man is responsible for the decisions. He's responsible for carrying the load. He is the captain of the ship, right? All of the burden of the family, of what we need to get taken care of, that's all with the man. And because the men in my life didn't exactly give me the greatest set of guiding principles, my godfather, who helped raise me, is currently serving 2 life sentences plus 62 years on top of it. My father is now passed on. But as I was growing up, most of the men in my life, they gave me really, really warped sense of how to act and who to be. So as I became my own man, I understood that it didn't matter what was going on in the house, I needed to fix it. It didn't matter if I had a problem, I needed to handle it. And the sad part about that is because when I felt stress, and when I felt like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. My wife used to complain because, like I said, drug problem, we both used drugs. There was a lot. My wife stabbed me in the chest. We had a lot of problems. They were a very dysfunctional relationship. And everybody would come to me because I'm father, I'm husband, I'm leader. And I wasn't always doing it right. Matter of fact, it could be argued I really screwed up my life, my kids' life, everybody else around me. But when I felt that weight, I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't talk to anyone. I just kind of absorbed it, and I just ate it. And I had all that pain inside. And it wasn't until I made this huge shift in my life by being open to what's possible, by creating a little bit of vulnerability in my life, by allowing someone else to help me. So I always tell people that most of my life was like the maze in the puzzle book. You enter in up here and you have to come out down here. It's a big circle with all the squiggly lines. And you go into the maze and you go roundy round, and then you hit a brick wall. And then I would turn around and go back out and start over again. Well, my life was the exact same way. I didn't know. And people would criticize how I did things. And I would say, okay, tell me a better way. And they would say, well, I don't know. And I'd say, then don't talk. Because you're not going to offer a solution. You can't criticize my current operating system. So I go back into the maze and I go round and round. And listen, guys, all I ever wanted was somebody to stop me on the way into the maze and say, wait a minute, just take my hand, because I know the way and I'll show you. And once I did that, once I humbled myself, once I grew and matured enough to ask someone else for help, to let someone else know that I don't know if I can do this anymore, I became the strongest man on the planet. And today, it is that thing that motivates me the most. Is, this is going to be a very telling thing. I could watch physical violence in front of me, and not be very moved by it at all. I'm really, really, really desensitized to it. But if you show me somebody that's struggling in some type of emotional or mental pain, I can't handle that. And it makes me want to throw on a cape and just fly in and rescue that person, because I know that, I used to tell my wife when we go back and forth, like, I would rather you just punch me in the face and give me a black eye, because that's going to heal in a couple of days. Because the stuff you say to me, it leaves a scar that I can't cover up. And it cuts deeper than anything you could do to me physically. So today, the thing that motivates me the most is to show up to help somebody else that might be suffering in some type of emotional or mental pain, just to let them know, guys, listen, there's an option, right? You don't have to have all the answers. There is another way, and you just haven't found it yet. But I believe now that I have the ability to get to the other side of a problem, that I have the responsibility to turn around, put my hand out, and say, take my hand and come with me and let me show you the way.
Thank you, Bob. That's awesome. And again, the authenticity again comes through. So
that's the second time you've mentioned that, Dave. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I have done in my life is, and this is, I can't take credit for it, it's a Brendan Burchard thing, huge Brendan Burchard fan. I have 3 keywords that run my life, and they are inspiration, authenticity, and joy. And I have an alarm set. My phone goes off several times a day to remind me to be inspiration, to be authenticity, to be joy. It's just like when I say I am love, I don't want to be loving, because I can also be angry and hateful and mean. But to be love is absolute. To be authenticity, to be inspiration, then I want to inspire people to be the best possible version of themselves, to unlock their true potential by truly loving who they are, right where they are, their own authentic self, and then to feel the joy that comes from truly loving who you be. And I have a room on Clubhouse every day, Monday to Friday, and we meet, and it's called Inspiration, Authenticity, and Joy. So you've mentioned it a couple of times. I needed to highlight that.
Well, you're doing great on the authenticity for sure. The inspiring story, we've got about 20 more minutes to build an inspiring story or two. The joy is the thing I'm going to ask about next then. Let's talk about building resilience and assisting men to bounce back. Where does joy come in there? Tell us a story of bounce back, resilience, and see if you can infuse the joy of that for some of our friends right now who might not be doing very well, for some of our friends who might be really in a tough time. Resilience, bounce back, finding joy.
Yeah. So for many years, I would, toggle between really the depths of despair and then these periods of elation by always seeking some type of joy. And to me at the time, joy was having fun and creating joy. When my mom died, this was back then we had 3 days of a wake and then a funeral. It was just a long drawn out process. It was horrible. And all I did was show up, tell jokes, try to entertain everybody because I didn't want everybody else to feel pain. And I was going to tell you about this earlier and I didn't, but just prior to my mom dying, my father had taken us to his girlfriend's house. And my mom was away in the hospital. She came home early and there was a big fight. All the police came. And I remember her standing at the car and she's hysterical. All hell had just broken loose. My father's on his knees in the driveway, one arm around me, one arm around my brother. And she's crying. And she's saying, just give me my kids and let me go. And I looked at her and I said, I don't want to be with you. I want to stay with my dad. But my father said, go with mommy and I'll be there later. And so I did. And I went home with her that night and she was in and out of the house and crying, a lot of stuff going on, telephone calls and whatnot. And then she left. She said, I'm going to go get cigarettes and I'll be right back. and she never came home again. And for 15 years, I carried the guilt and the shame of the last thing I said to my mother was, I don't want to be with you. And it governed who I was. I hated myself for it. And through lots of therapy and lots of analysis and lots of help from other people, I realized that the night in the driveway when all hell broke loose was almost 2.5 months prior to her dying. For that whole stretch, it was just her and I at the house. It was just her and I spending time together. It was just her and I creating joy and finding love and pouring into each other. We had that moment all the way up until the time she died. But in my very traumatized, immature brain at the time, the first thing I did was react with guilt and shame because I had said that and I blocked out all that time. But when I allowed myself to get some help, to go through the process of what had happened, to really talk about it for the first time in my life with some people that could help me go through this process, the process of healing, the process of identification, I realized I had that. Her and I, we had that time together. And that helped me to experience the joy of appreciating something that was tragic. And yet I still got to benefit from it because it was something that, only with the help of others could I unlock and remember the joy that was within.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm going to take it one further step because I wanted to go a little deeper, and it actually plays into the next question.
I love that you do that, Dave, because I'm all about driving down to get to the bottom of what's really going on. So have at it.
I wanted to talk about the healing process after a trauma. And I would invite you to share with me, does it only apply to the victim, or does it also apply to the perpetrator in healing through trauma? And perhaps what some of your experiences about perhaps your mother experience, or your father experience, and maybe even give us an insight into some of those wonderful healing processes you went through in therapy.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. I just made a podcast about this, so it's so fresh in my mind. We spoke about it in the IAJ room in Clubhouse about a week ago. So this is really, really top of mind for me lately. And that's forgiveness. Guys, understand something. Lots of bad things happen to us, right? I created a lot of problems in my life. The same year my mom died, my parents didn't want us kids to see them fight. So they sent my brother here. They sent me there. I was sent out to California. And I jokingly, because I used to use humor to deal with all my pain, right? So for years, I called that experience of me being in California as the 9-year-old boy, my summer of sodomy, right? I was sent to stay with people. There's somebody there, used me like a pin cushion and created lots of hate and lots of anger. And I would have much rather watched my parents fight. There I go, using humor again for something that is really not funny at all. It's really quite tragic. But I always used humor to deal with this pain, and I didn't know how to forgive anybody. So I would just mask everything by lying to myself and lying to everyone else. So the best example that I can share for forgiveness is my father robbed me of a childhood. There's no other way to look at it for me for many years, right? Like I should have had a childhood. He took my mom away, and I hated everything about life. Hated my family. I hated my friends. I questioned God. I just hated everyone. Why me? And I only brought it up to my father once. And it was as an adult, many years later, I asked him to tell me the truth about what happened that night. And he tried to beat the brakes off of me. And I was a grown man and he was drunk. I was able to get away, but I never brought it up again. But many years later, I found myself incarcerated. I was serving another county jail sentence which, like I said earlier, I've been arrested 40 or 50 times, always for assault. That was my go-to for how to deal with how I felt. Right? I'd go out and get into a fight. You go out and have someone beat me up. Didn't matter if I won or lost, because the pain that I got from the physical altercation, whether you were beating me up or I was beating you up, it felt so much better than the pain that was right here. So my dad comes to visit me one day, and we're in the visiting room at the county jail, and I start crying, which, by the way, the jail visiting room is not the place for a man to be crying. It invites all kinds of other problems. But I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I said to him, I want to let you know, because at the time, my brother was in a different cell for a different charge, but we were both there at the same time. And I said to my father, I'm really sorry for what I've done for you or to you, because I can't imagine, now that I have grown sons, I can't imagine what it's like for you to come to a jail where you know both your sons are sitting in a cage. And I'm sorry for the pain that I've caused you. And I want to let you know that I forgive you for all of the pain that you've caused me, because I understand that you were just being you. And we don't come with instruction manuals. When we have children, they just come, they just arrive. And nobody tells us, there's no how-to. There's no perfect guide on how to raise children. And when we bring our messy selves into raising a child, now we're just raising children with our messy selves, right? Just because we have a child doesn't cure anything. It usually adds problems. So he was just trying to navigate through life given the set of principles he learned, which were no better than the ones he gave me. And I said to him, I forgive you and I love you. And guys, let me tell you something about forgiveness. You know, just like the guy that used me as a pincushion, I don't, you know, for until 2018, that happened in 1979. In 2018, I made a decision, right? Are you noticing a pattern? Once again, I made a decision to go back to California. I hadn't been there since 1979. And the reason was because everything in California is bad. Everybody out there sucks. Everything is bad. That's where that thing happened to me. So I hate everyone. I hate the place. Everything about it's bad. But once I was able to go through my own fundamental journey and my own process of healing, and I thought that I was healed as it pertains to California, until somebody would mention it, and I'd say, oh, there are bad people out there. And I realized, Bob, it wasn't a state, and it wasn't everybody in it that was causing me hurt and pain. It's just one guy. And I had to truly forgive him. So to check myself, to create new, as I mentioned earlier, I put my business on hold, and I went out there and took a job with this guy I know for a couple months so that I could truly immerse myself in being in this creating new experience and creating new triggers. And I went out there with my eyes wide open, with an open heart and an open mind. And I loved it. Like, I totally get why people are out in California. First of all, the weather's beautiful every day. You know, everybody's kind of chill and laid back. I'm from New York. It's a totally different vibe. And I really enjoyed it. But I robbed myself of the opportunity to see that for so many years. And so what my point is that when you forgive somebody else, you're not telling that person, like, it's okay what you did to me. You're just saying, I accept that it happened. Because it's not still happening. And as long as the thing that hurt isn't still occurring, then you give it its time. You go through the process. You speak with some people. You go through what you need to go through it. Because I have tried every single way on the planet to go around the pain. There's just no way. The only way to get through it is to go through it. And once I allowed myself the time to go through the process of experiencing the hurt, of being honest about the hurt, of feeling that and allowing myself to say what happened and share with someone else what happened, I could start the process of forgiveness. And forgiveness isn't about telling that guy what you did to me was okay. Forgiveness is about taking the yoke off of my neck, because I'm not going to carry the pain anymore. I'm not going to carry the guilt and the shame. When I said to my father, I forgive you for what you've done, because whether or not he cares is irrelevant to me. I allow myself to be free. That's how you unlock your true potential, is because you take off those yokes and you break those chains that keep you small, that keep you way down, that keep you tied up from being I love to help people find their switch, the light switch, the one that when you find it, you found it, and you flip that switch, and all of a sudden it's like, you start to shine like the bright and beautiful star that you were meant to be. And those are the things that you need to do to get there. And I love to be able to help people go through the process of healing and forgiving, because it ain't about the other person. It's about you being free so that you can shine like the star that you were meant to be.
Excellent. Excellent. That was very inspiring. Thank you so much, Bob. Great way of transitioning and being able to share forgiveness. I believe we could have a whole show on forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
And I will go a little deeper just to ask, again, one or two ways to assist people in the forgiveness process. You shared a great way to do it.
So
I've experimented with nature and experimented with writing or creativity. What have been some of your ways that have assisted you? Your idea of going back to California with a whole new mindset. I love your concept of new. What would be one or two other tips you might assist our viewers today who are, wow, I just still can't forgive that person, or I can't forgive God, I can't forgive. What would be one of your invitations?
So there are a couple of different tricks. Like I said, I went out to California with an open mind and an open heart to create new triggers and just be in that environment. About a year later, I went back down to Florida. My wife and I lived there for a while, and there were a lot of different areas, like here, where that's where that thing happened. That's where she did this, or this where this happened. And I went there with the same intention, right? I'm going to create new triggers. And I went to these places, same exact way I went to California, with I'm going to create something new. I'm going to go to the place and I'm going to have an event that takes place kind of like returning to the scene of the crime. Now, I don't suggest that right off the bat. Definitely don't. Initially, what I would suggest, and by the way, what I would do there is create these new events so that I have a new memory for that place. So when you say California, I don't think of being sodomized for months. I think of, I was out there working and having a good time. I met a guy out there and we became great friends. Like that's what the memory is now. But prior to getting to this place, when you're just starting, for me, I had to have conversations. Listen, the fact that I'm on this show right now, exposing myself, creating this vulnerability, obviously I'm not that reticent. I'm okay with talking, but it wasn't always that way. But I had to have conversations with people. And I think therapy is an excellent tool. I think every single person on the planet should have a therapist, and their therapist should have a therapist, and so on and so on. Absolutely. Because it's just an outlet that you can tap into. See, the beautiful thing, you know why you pay a therapist? Because they're not invested in what you got going on. You see, they don't have a horse in the race, so to speak. See, if you talk to your mom, your dad, your husband, your wife, or your kids, I used to worry that because if I shared with them how I really felt, the first question they would say is, how's this going to affect me? So a therapist isn't emotionally attached to your outcome. They don't have a horse in the race. They're not living a life with you. So you go there, you pay them for their time, and you dump your problems, and you get to go out the door. They give you some suggestions, tips, tools, tricks, apps, hacks, practices, whatever it is that you can implement in your life. So that would be the first thing I do, is definitely start to seek some professional help just to be able to talk to somebody. Because there is a tremendous freedom in letting it out. Just, I always say, I call it my Peppino the mouse theory, right? Like when you put the hamster in the wheel and he runs and runs and runs, he can run his little legs off, but he's still in the wheel. When we have a problem, when we have something that's weighing on our mind, it spins around in our head, just round and round and round and round, like that hamster in the wheel, just going round and around and around. It doesn't get anywhere. But once you open up the door to the ball, the hamster can run. He's got all that room. You won't find that hamster. Well, the same thing happens with us. Once you open up your mouth and you let that little marble that's spinning around in your head, once you let it out, it's got all this room to get absorbed into the energy of the rest of the world. And so for me, the first thing to do was just to talk. Now, some of you might have a problem talking to another person. So I say, before you do that, back it up even further. Have a conversation with whatever you believe in. And I'm not saying that you have to believe in God, Buddha, Yahweh, whatever, Allah. It doesn't matter. Whatever your thing is, life, source, energy, whatever. But you got to, at some point, if to be truly transformed, the transformational process is mind, body, and spirit. You have to understand that you can't excel in one or two of those areas and be completely transformed. It's a trilogy. And you have to be connected with something. And whatever it is that you're connected with, start with the conversation with that. And just ask for some peace. People say that prayer is asking for God or whoever's help, and meditation is listening. So I don't know about you guys, but when I started my transformation, I had a mentor, someone that could help me through it. And he would say, Bob, we got to go quiet down. I want you to stare at this piece of paper for 10 minutes. And I said, are you kidding me? There's no way. I can't do that. He said, how about 10 seconds? Now that I could do. And I could stare at that thing for 10 seconds. So I learned how to slow myself down. And the reason why I'm saying that is because at first, you got to start somewhere. Have a conversation with whatever it is that you give yourself to, whatever higher power or energy that you believe in. Talk to it first and just ask and believe that it's possible to remove that yoke. Please allow me the process of healing and forgiving. And I've written letters. I've written more letters to my mother than I ever did when she was alive. And I've said all kinds of stuff. I keep a journal, talk to her on a regular basis, close my eyes at night and talk to her. I talk to my dad, who's now dead, and just share with him, hey, I didn't like that you did this or did that. It's just, to me, letting it out, having some form of release. I like exercise. I go to the gym and work out. That is a tremendous release. You get all these extra juices flowing in your body and you feel good. There's that mind, body, and spirit. There's the trilogy. And then you get to, and then last, I'll just say this and I'll be quiet. If you're struggling with something and you can't stop obsessing about it, you don't want to call anybody and ask for help, then here's what you do. Be of service. Ask to help someone else. Because I'll tell you something, when you show up to help someone else, we put our problems on the back burner for a little while. And you'll be surprised how often you're the one that benefits from helping somebody else.
Thank you very much for that wonderful insight. In fact, you jumped ahead. That was my next question. So you just answered my next question. So I'm going to recap it for our listeners if they didn't fully get it. Is that my question was going to be, what is Bob's strategy for mind, body, and spirit? And body, you heard some of the things he likes to do is go do some gym, go do some workouts, or get the endorphins working for him, aligned with him. For the mind, there's the writing, there's the prayer to the ancestors, his parents. There's the prayer to having a conversation. As you can tell, Bob now is quite a conversationalist. He probably wasn't in the type of conversation that he's having today 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. It really was that 7 years ago where the conversation started to be much more kinder, more curious, more open, more willing to renew his life. And so mind, body, spirit, Bob's approaches of taking whatever he is right now, and he's been able to infuse that last one of service. If you really want to get yourself out of a very challenging time, go look to be of service to somebody. It has this elixir. Bob, tell us a little bit more of your podcast, of your clubhouse, and the ways that if being of service there in your coaching business has really taken your life to a whole new level.
Yeah. So, like I said, the third piece of the puzzle is, mind, body, and spirit. There's a couple of things that happened recently. I'll share this real quick. For the first time in my life, I learned that food can change how I feel. How awesome is that? I used to eat just to stay alive. Like, it didn't matter what I ate. As long as I eat, I'm not going to die of starvation. I'll be okay. But now that I've gotten my body a little bit more finely tuned, now I start worrying about what I put into it, food-wise. And I've started eating a clean diet that when I eat something that's not on that list, it actually makes me feel bad. And I was like, who knew? You read about it all the time, but until you experience it, there's that difference, right? There's the difference between knowledge that, things we read, like academics and whatnot, and then experiential knowledge where we've gone through it. And that's why things like 12-step programs work. That's why I'm able to help someone else. Because when you tell me I'm going through XYZ and I say, guess what, buddy? I know, because I know what it feels like to be you. I know what it feels like to feel that pain. I know what it feels like to be out of options. I know what it feels like to have, a crack pipe in one hand and a pistol in the other while tears are running down my face. And I don't know which one's going in my mouth next. And my kids are asleep in the next room. Like, I know what that feels like. But the beautiful thing about that pain is because I'm now on the other side of it, I said this earlier, I have not only the ability, but the responsibility to come back and say, hey, who needs my help? Because that's the third part. That's the spirit connection to something greater than us. And listen, something greater than you can just be the people around you. It can just be this group right here. What we're doing right here is immeasurable because we can provide a service to let somebody know, hey, me too. And if you need help, call me, reach out to me. I have a podcast. It's called Beyond Our Boundaries. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. And what I do is I do a deep dive each day, and I talk about, I like to shine the light on the different aspects of our personality and character so that we can help you to be the best possible version of yourself. And I love to share those, but that's a monologue. That's just Bob talking. But you can come into Clubhouse and you can go to the Inspiration, Authenticity, and Joy room. It's there Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern US. And it's under the Beyond Our Boundaries Club. And everybody can go on Clubhouse now, whether you have an Android or an iPhone. And you can go to the Inspiration, Authenticity, and Joy room. And then I get to hear from you. And if you need me, reach out. Send me a message in my Facebook or Instagram. You can go to my webpage. You can book a call with me, a discovery call. If you just need to, hey, I just need to talk for a minute, right? You just need to understand, guys, that, pain is inevitable, but suffering is something we do to ourselves. We don't have to suffer in silence. And there are avenues for you to explore. And just reach out and say, hey. And if you can't say I need help, just say hello. All great relationships start with hello. And I know what that means when somebody reaches out to me and says hello. And if you need help, I can help you. And if I can't, I'll find someone who can.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your sharing inspiring stories, elevating what joy might mean to people. I do have a quick question about this idea that you talked about, tragic to magic, and this idea that you've had a lot of experience of tragic, yet you have sort of been able to figure out a way to turn tragic into magic. When you hear that phrase, or you possibly can share what that term means to you.
I've kind of already talked about it. We just didn't give it that name. When I said earlier, Dave, when I described the story about what happened with my mother and my father, and then my mom died, that's a tragedy. Who would you think anybody would be like, oh, that's a great thing? No, everybody would identify that's a tragedy. But here's the magic, and this is a measure of who I be today. If not for that singular event, my life wouldn't have taken the course that it took. I would not have probably not have made the decisions I made. I would not have tried to find ways to get through my pain using everything from drugs, sex, alcohol, gambling, and violence. I wouldn't have created all this anger. I wouldn't have been in and out of jail a trillion times. I wouldn't have gotten involved in a dysfunctional relationship. I wouldn't have had all of these traumas. I might not have spent, the summer of sodomy occurred before, but because they were fighting, right? Like none of that stuff would have happened. And guess what? We wouldn't be speaking. I wouldn't have been able to be of service to thousands of people that I've spoken to literally around the globe, because what would I be speaking about? So the magic from the tragedy is that I'm okay today, is that I truly love who I be. And because of that, I can help you to get to that same place. And that's why maybe it was a sacrifice. Maybe if you believe in the big picture, sometimes we can't see the picture when we're in the frame, but if you can remove yourself and see what the big picture is, maybe it was my destiny to be on this path, right? Maybe what happened to mom, or at least that's the way I choose to look at it. How about that, right? We don't have to get divine, but this is the story I've told myself is that if that thing didn't happen, that tragic event didn't occur, I wouldn't have the magic of being able to connect with on an emotional level so deeply, so tightly, so well with so many other people, because I wouldn't have been able to come from that place of experiential knowledge on what it feels like to feel pain.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's one of the ways that I've been taught to really express gratitude to people. Something that was taught to me when I spent time in Asia is thank you, thank you, thank you. Mm-hmm. Your wisdom today, your experiences, I hope really will resonate with people who have the opportunity to hear it. I believe that the tragic that you have gone through is providing you with an incredible platform to really reach out and share and uplift people around the world. So thank you very much. I'm going to do our little sharing about Voice of Men now.
Sure.
This is, we believe that today's conversation might have brought many dimensions from the show. We'll continue this type of conversation and share more stories throughout our different platforms. I have a few announcements to share. We have live shows weekly. Open Up. It's a live talk show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. We have a Tamil live talk show on Sundays at 8 a.m. EST. We have monthly webinars where we bring expertise in organizations and discuss particular topics each time. Monthly special show, the Unspoken Tears, the show that we've just had the privilege of hearing and sharing with Bob. That's the second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The focus of this show is domestic violence against men, bullying, male sexual abuse, traumas, and human trafficking. We have panel discussions once a month in English and Tamil, where we bring together different people from parts of the world and share their perspectives through life and experiences. We have a podcast that's available. All of these are available on iPhone, Google Play. The monthly men's group meetings only for men are the third Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. through Zoom. Please reach out to the website for additional details. And Passing the Talking Stick is an Indigenous peer-to-peer support group, the fourth Friday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. through Zoom. The next one is on Friday, July 23rd at 6 p.m. Please join through Zoom. The link will be available on our Facebook group. We're always looking for new members, volunteers to join the Voice of Men 360. There are no limitations with gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. If you want to be guest on any of our shows or have somebody that you would suggest or recommend would be great for the show, please let us know. Please reach out through Facebook. We'd love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, community leaders, association, corporations, governments, officials. For details, please check out info Voice of Men 360 or info at Voice of Men 360. That's a little bit of our connection. It looks like we brought in right on time. Bob, thank you so very much. Would you have a last word that you'd like to share as we bring the session to a close?
I'm just super honored that you guys asked me to speak at all. Very humbled anytime I get to be asked of my opinion. So thank you very much. And thank you, both Dave and Stephen, for doing a phenomenal job of leading this conversation. I couldn't have designed a better flowing conversation. So thank you very much for who you guys have chosen to be and how you show up. Thank you.
Thank you.